back to another episode of Tan's Two Cents. I'm your host, Tan Wilson, and today we'll discuss more government contracting strategies with someone who needs no introduction to our intellectuals, Mark Amtower. Mark isn't just a colleague, he's a friend and one of the most respected voices in the GovCon space. Known widely as the godfather of government marketing, Mark has been a trailblazer in this industry for decades, helping countless businesses navigate the complex landscape of government contracting with savvy marketing and positioning strategies. Mark, it's always a pleasure to chat with you, and I've learned so much from our conversations over the years, and I know our intellectuals are in for a real treat today. We'll explore how contractors can go beyond just writing proposals and make a mark, pun intended, in this competitive market. Welcome to our show, Mark.
Dan, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's always great to have other like-minded and colleagues on our show, and I love marketing and I love LinkedIn. So our intellectuals are in for a real big treat in talking about how we can market ourselves a little bit better. So, before we get into the nitty gritty of our episode, let's kick things off on a lighter note. So, Mark, you and I have been in the trenches of this industry for a while now, and I'm curious if you could go back to when you first started in government contracting, what's the one piece of advice that you would give your younger self that might surprise us?
Um, for the first few years of Amtower and Company, I was you know, doing whatever I could to make money. And I didn't have I mean, I knew I wanted to do the marketing side. Direct mail was really big back then. But I needed some adult supervision, if you will. So it wasn't until really like the late 80s that I figured out I needed mentorship. And I found a couple. Lynn Bateman was one of the premier advisors on contracting, the FAR, the DFAR, all of that stuff. So she took me under her wing. I attended a lot of her sessions, met a lot of neat people, and I learned the framework, which is important for us. Um, but that wasn't quite the same. There was a gentleman named Tom Hewitt back then as well, and Tom was literally the focal point of the government contracting community. So I got to know him. I offered to review his annual marketing plans for free, and he accepted. And we got to be good friends. And watching him navigate the GovCon universe was a PhD in what to do in the market. And anytime I needed to reach out to somebody, Hewitt would know who they were and he would connect us. So I would say if you're out there, find a mentor who can really help you understand the arena you're playing. This is a very complex market, as you well know, and there's a lot of people out there who are either charlatans or so or fairly good, and then there's the upper echelon. You want to pal around in the upper echelon, but you need somebody to truly help you get your arms around who you are, what you do, and who needs to hear from you.
Yeah.
That would be my biggie, and that's not something I talk about frequently.
No, that's really insightful because I think we all need mentors, at least shooting for and trying to emulate or at least learn from people who have come before or people who are really doing wonderful things. And I have peer mentors. I have people who I've gone through and have sought their advice, and I continue to kind of watch and learn. Um, and it tells me a lot about you because you asked for it. You went out and actively sought it. I think there's a lot of bravado in this industry. There's a lot of people who come off as like, oh, I know everything. I'm so smart. Like, and I'm just like, I cringe when people call me a SME, it's like, and so yes, there are things that I know more than other people, but there's still a whole lot of things in this industry that I'm still learning every day.
Well, if you're not learning every day, you're not paying attention because this market morphs. The marketing platforms morph. Boy, I've had to morph. I started my business in 1985. 19, that's like 40 years ago. Um, I've been doing this a while, and the marketing skills are relatively the same. The venues are radically different.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a really good segue into our first segment, where I want to talk about the evolution of government marketing. And so, Mark, like you said, you've seen the landscape evolve significantly. So, what are some of the major shifts that you've observed in marketing to government agencies, and which foundational strategies have remained steadfast over the years?
Um, Finding venues to actually meet with prospects and customers remains core. So in the 80s, we had this thing called direct marketing, snail mail. You get you could send stuff to feds in their office, and it was huge, and I was really good at that. But events, PR, and snail mail were three legs of the stool back then. In the mid 90s, this Netscape thing came along with Navigator, and there were other platforms, but basically, email invaded our
Yeah,
universe. And that was probably my first major morph. I had to abandon the world of direct marketing, which was becoming difficult and expensive anyway, and migrate to this platform and to the web. And fortunately, at that time, I was advising the company that had or deployed the first transactional GovCon website, Falcon Microsystems. I was working with Den DeYoung and his team. John Lee, who now works with Craig Abod. Craig Abod was at Falcon Microsystems back then. He is Carasoft. Um, so, um, so that was a significant morph. In the late 90s, early 2000s, we had the advent of these Web 2.0 tools. We had, wikis, blogs,
yeah.
video, all of this stuff. And you had to adapt to that and figure out where it fit. Now, and here's the tricky part for us. The government is not an early adopter on most of these things. They want to see other people bleed at that edge before they stick their toe in. They aren't going to dive in, they're just going to stick their toe in. And it's an incremental process for them to be introduced to this.
Right.
So, 2007, I read the first edition of the New Rules of Marketing and PR, David Meerman Scott's book, now in its ninth edition. Nine.
Oh my goodness.
God, yeah, really pisses me off.
Talk about surviving time.
Yeah, but I mean, it's neat. But the first one was key because I joined LinkedIn in 2004. When I joined, there was less than a quarter million people on LinkedIn. So I was sitting there waiting for something to happen, and it wasn't. 2007, I read David's book, and it's about the utilization of these tools, the democratization of content sharing, user
Mhm.
generated content. So I'm looking at what he's saying, and I'm looking at LinkedIn and say,
No one's doing it. Yeah.
we have a fit. So I started writing about LinkedIn. I started writing on LinkedIn. I started speaking about LinkedIn in 2009. I started coaching people and companies on using LinkedIn. But the ability for users to generate content. So I was not necessarily at the forefront, but I was at the forefront in our market on that. So now LinkedIn has over a million people worldwide. I can track almost 3 million feds on LinkedIn through my annual census. Um, the market's here. So if you're not here and not using the platform well, you're falling behind. And
Yeah,
now
no,
we
I
have
totally agree.
generative AI.
Right? We're into our next morph, right?
Yeah,
which we'll talk
and
about
boy, is
the
that gonna
future
be tough.
trends. It really is. And I think like, like you said, there's still some people who are a little bit, behind, and we'll kind of touch on, some of that too. But I don't even remember when I joined LinkedIn. It's one of those things that's just a blur, right? And it just becomes kind of like something that you do every day. You wake up, you brush your teeth, you put on your clothes, you had coffee. It's like I've kind of used LinkedIn as one of my morning rituals, right? Before I even get out of bed, I go on LinkedIn. And like one of my favorite people that I like to check on is Glenn Robinson over at Blue Ridge. And I was like, okay, what protest am I going to read about here this morning? Am I going to get all fired up and have to jump out of bed, or am I going to, sit here for a while and enjoy the theater that is LinkedIn?